So to begin the frog painting, this is a drawing that I originally redrew from looking at a photograph on my tablet using a program called Procreate. I made all the corrections on the tablet, then I printed out to the scale I needed a version of that drawing. And this version I'm going to use to transfer to my watercolor paper. Why do I do it that way? Because I don't want to ruin a clean sheet of watercolor paper by drawing directly on it. I want to keep my hand off it as much as possible. I want to avoid doing any kind of erasing or anything like that. So the paper is basically pristine. But now I'm going to transfer this image to my paper. How do I do that? Get the piece of paper out of the way. It's a big one. It's a big sheet. I want to protect my table from graphite. And what I'm going to do is with the powdered graphite, and this is my favorite way of doing this. You could also buy pre-prepared paper, graphite paper. You take a little bit of Kleenex and rub the graphite in. Why do I like doing it this way? Because it eliminates multiple sheets of paper if you're going to transfer using this method. I'd rather be dealing with one piece of paper rather than two. Without smudging this all over the place, I determine where I want it based on my photographic source. I took the original photo at a place called Avalon on the north shore of Long Island, Avalon Nature Preserve. I didn't bother to draw everything in that's in the source photo because there's no need to. I'm going to draw it out as I develop the piece. I just wanted to concentrate on the more challenging part, which was the frog. So how I transfer. Using a ballpoint pen, not like we've done in the classroom with a pencil. Pencil is a bit softer, and although you can get a fairly good line, I prefer the ballpoint pen. Don't press extraordinarily hard. Still referring to my photo, to do any corrective drawing, I never take my eye off my subject matter. I have my subject matter in front of me on my tablet. So, although I have the outline on this piece of paper, I'm still drawing. I'm still looking at my subject. But if I saw anything that needed to be corrected, I wouldn't hesitate to make that correction as I do this. I love all these little doodads that are all over the place, these little green chlorophyll loaded plantlets. They're just floating. They punctuate the overall monochromatic brown color of the water area in the frog very nicely. Very important element. But there's no need for me to have drawn all of this out in advance. I can place them as needed as I develop the watercolor painting. These are important, the ones that I have actually on the frog. This frog is very content to let me photograph it. Just stayed there. Okay. So I think you get the idea. I'm using a steady, even pressure. And I'm going over my line work. Another advantage of using a ballpoint pen is if you want to save your drawing to reuse it. You know, say your painting didn't come out the way it was expected to, and you want to give it another shot, well, you can use the same piece, maybe not even apply new graphite, just rub around what's on the paper, and it'll sort of reactivate it, and use a different color ballpoint pen so you can see your new line work. If I was to retrace this using black ink, I would never be able to see what it is that I'm doing. So what's happening here? The frog's leg tucks in. And then we have this area partly under the water. So we have all these, I love the way the water lips up. on objects that are floating on the surface. Oh, notice, I don't know if I mentioned that, I taped it down. The last thing you want to do is hold your paper down and have it move. You'll never be able to realign it. Okay, this area has a cluster. That's why I thought it was important to draw them, indicate where some of these little abstract shapes are going to go. And there's beautiful little highlights throughout that I'll establish once I begin painting. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to put this on fast forward so you can watch the rest of this tracing process unfold quickly. Okay, let's take a peek and see if I got it all laid out. I don't want to remove it completely from the paper yet. Very light, but it looks just about right. I have enough guidelines for me to build into. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to leave it at that. One thing I would like to say, when you're using a method like this, don't all of a sudden just get locked into your drawing that you're transferring. Two things. I always like to redraw my subject freehand because it forces me to see exactly what's happening with the shapes. And make corrections as I develop the drawing onto the paper, the watercolor paper. So never take your eye off your subject matter, whether it be an actual scene that you're painting plein air or you're referring to a photograph. And simply use the drawing that you scaled up to transfer to your paper as a guide. A guide to be corrected if you need to. For example, see the little indication, the curvature of the head over here, indicating a little nostril area and something else going on there. Now I might be tempted, because it is very light, to use these guidelines and with this is a 2B pencil, do a little bit more correcting on the paper. Okay, the eye comes down. There's going to be a little plantlet over there. This eye is clearly outlined and looks like burnt umber. And the much darker pupil area. Here all I see is pupil, and it has little green little things sticking on it. drawing and observing your subject matter is an opportunity for you to really understand your subject and get to know what the form is doing. And when you're looking at all these little plantlets, don't think in terms of just circles on the water. They're not. Each one has a characteristically individual shape. Try to capture their variety. Their uniqueness as individual forms. Good. This area I didn't define well in my initial paper drawing, and that's important. It's the frog's foot, if you call it a foot. Okay, I think we're about ready to begin, Mr. Frog. So the next step is to start painting this, and I could mask out all these little green things that actually are going to spread throughout the entire surface of the water. I want to capture that feeling of water, of still pond water. I'm going to stick to my primary colors: Windsor Red, Ultramarine Blue, and Cobalt Blue, and Windsor Yellow, and maybe Windsor Yellow Medium to create all my browns. I think it's important that you do as much mixing as possible using just the primaries and not rely on a lot of these readily available secondary and tertiary colors that you can buy. Keep it simple. But I need to clean my palette off a little bit. Okay, with a nice clean palette, I have everything I need. Make sure there's no paint on the bottom of my palette. I want a nice burnt sienna. So let's go into my Windsor Red. And into the Windsor Red, I'm going to throw Ultramarine Blue. I have a nice violet right now, or I should say a nice purpley color. Get a little bit more Windsor Red in there. And let's go into Windsor Yellow. So I'm basically using red, yellow, and blue. Let's see what we have here. Okay, we're going to throw a little Windsor Yellow Medium into that. Here, a little bit of Windsor Yellow Medium. some more ultramarine blue into that mixture. Now what's going to happen if you you approach your painting specifically as a 3-color primary color and restrict yourself to the primaries? You will start to learn a lot about color mixing. And at first it might seem challenging. I'm going right down into my yellow there. But you may begin to like it. What happens when I add the yellow? I'm painting wet into wet. Get a little bit more of that red into my, to pick up some more of that golden burnt sienna. This is going to be a dark little area here. I'm just going around it right now. I want to keep it white so I know where that dark area is going to be. You can give this method a try, sticking to your primaries, but if you start to feel uncomfortable at any moment, you can always go into your burnt sienna and yellow ochre, because those are wonderful colors to work with. Here, let's see what happens if I add a little burnt sienna right now. Winsor Newton, burnt sienna. Ah, yeah, okay. That actually happens to be one of my favorite colors. I stick usually to just one brand of paint, and that is Winsor Newton. But occasionally I will buy a golden core. When it comes to acrylics, I stick exclusively to golden acrylics. Now, if I take my burnt sienna, so I'm not sticking to my guns of red, yellow, and blue, but burnt sienna is red. And I'm seeing a lot of dark in the frog's body going down this way. I can take ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue produce a wonderful dark grayish brown. And the beauty of mixing your brown instead of grabbing a tube of Payne's Gray or something like that is you can modulate the brown to the blue end or to the red end by varying your quantity of ultramarine blue or burnt sienna. Yeah, now I see sort of a highlight, a little bit of a water lip here that I'm going to want to pick up on. Now look at that. Look at that gray. It's remarkable. So, but why buy a tube that creates gray using the same mixtures of colors? Why not just make your own? I want to lift out a little of this area. There's a highlight on here. And while everything is still wet, and I've shown this in class many times, I can take a clean brush, not a wet brush. You see me dip it in water, but I squeeze out the moisture, and I can draw into my surface to create passages of light to dark that I actually see in the subject. Careful, I don't want to get back runs. See a little of that happening here. Although a back run on a subject that's wet can actually be very effective, because it actually looks like it occurred naturally on the subject. Yeah, a little bit of a highlight coming down there. I'm going to go back into my burnt sienna and drop that into this dark color. Little too wet. What do I do? Do I panic? I don't know. You notice I didn't pre-dampen the area like I very often do in class. I'm just flowing it right into the dry paper. And I punctuate the dark areas, and it gets really dark as it moves down here with lighter blues. And you're going to see me doing that in a minute. Let me try to capture this. It's important to be working into your wet into wet. And this is just about too dry. Let me see if I can get a suggestion of absorption into this area. I think I did. I hope I did. Okay, so I'm carrying down this color that I mixed, which is ultramarine blue. I added much more ultramarine blue to push the color to the blue end. And I think this is where the body of the frog starts to mingle with the surface of the water. It's amazing how they just float. I try to float. I go down like a rock. What I'm going to do now is I want to take cerulean blue, some clean water, some cerulean blue, which is another primary color, variation on blue, and I'm going to drop this in. So I see all these little blue highlights. I'm going with the cerulean because it has more of an opaque quality, and I think it'll hold up nicely against the darker color. That's a combination of the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Which I'm going to reinforce here. Often I'll apply color back in like I'm doing. You see I have the ultramarine blue, the cerulean blue, but I'm going over this dark area again because I want to push the cerulean towards the top of the frog. So I'm using color to push color. And I want to get a little bit more blue in there. Now, something that I normally wouldn't even consider, but the photograph is suggesting it, is the way the surface of the frog is dappled because of the texture of its skin. I could possibly pull that off with the addition of salt, but the salt has to be applied specifically at the right time. I hesitate to do that. I think I've discussed this many times in class why I don't like salt. And of course, once I do it, I'm committed. Can't turn back with watercolor. It's like a brain game. You make a decision, you have to go with it. I'm going to let this area dry. This is just about what I would have done in class. And now I'd be telling you guys to go back and work on your paintings. I have to let this dry and then I'll continue laying it in. But I did bring up the salt. So what do? Should we give it a try? You will see on Friday the result of this. I hope it works. I'm not going to put on too much. because too much could be a disaster. How do I know when the salt is ready to be applied? You see a little bit of the shine on the paper. So it hasn't got to the point where it's just matte dry. There's still some water on the surface, and that's exactly when I want to add the salt. And I'm intentionally staying away from the lower areas that go deeper into the water, and you don't get any of that effect, a sparkly effect that I'm seeing. Okay, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna be very economical with the salt. I'm not gonna go any further. Okay, we'll come back to this later.